Fine. Thank you, Chitra. Okay. So Badram Karanebihi Shrunyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Rejatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastinah Indro Vridrashavaha Swastinah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinah Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Bruhaspati Datu यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रशुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम्नान्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् Akarishe Yatabotam Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam. So good afternoon, everyone. So you're all safe and well. It's very hot here. I think sitting inside the house and doing some divine contemplation seems to be the best thing to do at this point of time. So welcome to this session again. So as you know, over the past 6 weeks, we've slightly redesigned our Sunday deliberations so that we make it more interactive and we get everybody empowered in doing the philosophical discussions, spiritual discussions. So we have a core group of about 20-25. It's really heartening that we've all really gelled together over the last several months. And now what we have done is we've opened it up so that everybody feels empowered and are able to interact and contribute their thoughts and contribute to the success of Hindu Knowledge Academy. So with that spirit, we started off with Gita Chinthana as an interactive seminar series, and we've had 2 so far. We had the chapter 1, which was led by Sushrutji. Chapter 2, part A was led by Harish Ji and his team. And today, the part 2 of chapter 2 is led by Suresh Kakkanwadi Ji and his team, which is truly international. He is sitting in Switzerland coordinating this. We got 2 speakers from India, and the quiz is being conducted from Scotland. So welcome everyone, and I hope you enjoy this session. So Suresh, over to you.
Thanks, Madhu. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well, Suresh. Yeah.
So, Madhu, if you could help with the slides, please. If we go to the first slide. Manojavam Marutatulya Vegam Jitendriyam Buddhimatam Varishtam Vatatmajam Vanarayuta Mukyam Sri Ramadutam Shirasa Namami. So, good evening, friends, and welcome to this session wherein we are going to discuss the second half of the second chapter. If we go to the next slide, Madhu, please. The way we have structured this evening's session is that we will do a quick recap of the journey thus far, and then we will do a general introduction about chapter 2. Padmajaji then will review verses 40 and 41. Kamalaji will help us understand verses 54 and 55. And this will be followed by a quiz session that's being hosted by Pragnesh Ji. And what I would like to add here is that many of the answers to the questions that Pragnesh Ji would be asking will perhaps be leaked in the discussions leading up to the quiz. And during the quiz, if you have your Gita text open, I'm sure it will come handy. And of course, all questions pertain to this half, the second half of chapter 2. After that, we will again open up the forum for any comments, suggestions, additional thoughts, and we'll come back and look at the last couple of verses of this chapter to conclude the discussions on chapter 2. That's how we have structured this evening's session, and hopefully over the next 60 to 75 minutes, we should be able to cover the remaining portion of chapter 2. If we move to the next slide, to briefly recap what's happened thus far. As Madhuji was just mentioning, in the first session, while reviewing chapter 1, we looked at chapter 1 from the lens of trying to understand the mindsets of these three significant personalities in the context of Bhagavad Gita. We started with Dhritarashtra, who have already knowing, because this Gita takes place in Bhishma Parva, that the mighty Bhishma has fallen, still is so attached to his own sons that he differentiates between Pandu's sons and his sons, and still somewhere in his mind he has the hope that his sons will win the war. So an epitome of attachment is what we saw in Dhritarashtra's character. Then we looked at Duryodhana's mindset. Here is a king who is commanding 11 Akshoyani army, but despite that, he's uncertain, anxious, not trusting his own commander-in-chief, and actually instigating his teacher and the commander-in-chief on the battlefield. Then we looked at the mindset of a hero, our protagonist Arjuna, who's come to the battle overconfident, overzealous, instructing Krishna to take his chariot and place it in the midst of the two armies, and then suddenly becomes overcome, he's deluded, and then gets into a mindset as to where he simply doesn't want to fight and feels that war is unjustified. Then we move to chapter 2, wherein we saw that Krishna blatantly dismisses all of Arjuna's arguments, and Arjuna then transforms himself into a student and surrenders to Lord Krishna. Krishna then teaches Sankhya. At this juncture, I think it's important to know what Sankhya we are talking about. In the next slide, Madhu, and this was very nicely brought up in the last session that was led by Harish Ji. When we talk of Sankhya here, we are talking of Samyak Khyati, the most definitive knowledge about Atma Tattva, the nature of soul and reality. There are two other instances where Sankhya is used. There is another Sankhya school, which was actually taught by Vishnu's avatar of Kapila. And there is, of course, the Sankhya school, which is an atheist school. But what we are looking at when we say Sankhya Yoga here is, we are looking about the most definitive knowledge about Atma Tattva. Yoga, of course, as we all know, defines the ways of achieving, the ways of getting to know this definitive knowledge of Atma Tattva. And if one does that, Krishna says in the last verse of this chapter, what happens to him is that person then gets into a state of Brahmi Sthiti, a state of enlightenment, a state of super consciousness, where he becomes a Brahmajnani. So that's the context in which we are looking at chapter 2. And if we look at go to the next slide, last session, Harish Ji had very nicely given us a structure of the chapter 2. And if you all do remember, he had put the transiency of sense perception in the middle, and it was anchored in the four corners by the eternity of souls, Swadharma, Karma Yoga, and Sthita Prajna. What we've done here is we've just taken the same thought forward, but dissected the shlokas a little more to bring out some a sequential meaning to how the discussion in chapter 2 takes place. So from verses 1 to 10 is where we see Arjuna becoming a student. And between verses 11 to 30, Krishna talks about the eternity of the soul. And then between 31 and 38 is when Krishna talks about dharma and the consequences of not following one's own dharma. This we had discussed in the last session. In this session, we now make a transition from the Sankhya to the yoga part of it, as to how are we going to get to know this knowledge about Atma Tattva. And the discussion starts with what's the effort that is needed, and caution that to be not misled by incomplete and superficial understanding of the scriptures. And that's what is discussed between verses 39 and 46. And then Krishna goes on to define what is yoga. And some of the most famous verses of this chapter do come, wherein Krishna talks about the pursuit of action or knowledge between verses 47 and 53. Verse 54 is where Arjuna says, hey, hold on for a minute. And he wants to know what's the disposition of a person who has achieved, who knows, who's learned about this, the eternity of the soul and the Nitya Tattva, and he has that understanding. Krishna answers Arjuna's questions, and he does so by first describing the qualities of this person and then directly answering the question about how this person is disposed and what happens to this person after attaining this knowledge. A question generally bothers us, and to many, I suppose, and it would be fair to say to most of us perhaps. This journey towards understanding the eternity of the soul, the Nitya Tattva, the creation and all of Paramatma, we are saying, we're told he is incomprehensible. Nobody can ever know him fully. There is no one who has ever seen him who can come and tell us this is what it is. No one knows what mukti is about. There's nobody who can come and tell us. And whatever efforts that we do, we don't even know whether they're going to be yielding results, because it's supposed to come after many, many more births. And therefore, a thought perhaps might logically enter into one's mind that, is this effort really valuable? Is it really worthwhile? Why don't we just put some effort into those aspects where we can actually see the results, like building a house, earning money or something? Anticipating such questions, perhaps, Krishna directly takes this question head on. And what Krishna tells us is what Padmaja-ji will discuss in verses 40 and 41. Over to you, Padmaja-ji.
Thank you, Suresh-ji. I will be reciting the verse 40. Neha Bikramana Shosti Pratyavayo na vidyate Swalpam apyasya dharmasya Trayate mahato bhayat. Translation. Working in this state of consciousness, there is no loss or adverse result, and even a little effort saves one from great danger. Commentary. The great danger we face is that we may not get the human form in the next life, and instead go into the lower species of life, such as animals, birds, and the nether regions, etc. We cannot be complacent that the human form will remain reserved for us, for the next birth will be determined by our karmas and level of consciousness in this life. There are 8.4 million species of life in existence. The species below human beings, animals, birds, fish, insects, birds, etc., do not have an involved intellect as we humans do. Yet they also perform commonplace activities such as eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. Human beings have been endowed with the faculty of knowledge for a higher purpose, so that they may utilize it to elevate themselves. If humans utilize their intellects merely for doing the animalistic activities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending in a deluxe way, it is a misuse of the human form. For example, if someone makes eating as the primary pressure of life, then the body of a pig becomes most suitable for such a person, and thus that individual receives a pig's body in the next life. Next slide, please, Madhu. If someone makes sleeping the goal of life, then God deems that body of a polar bear is more suitable for such activity and allots it in the succeeding life. So the great danger before us is that we may not get a human birth in the next life. The Vedas state, "O human being, the human birth is a rare opportunity. If you do not utilize it to achieve your goal, you will suffer great ruin." Again, they state, if you do not strive for God realization in this life, you will continue to rotate in the 8.4 million species of life for many birds. However, once we commence on the journey of spiritual practice, then even if we do not complete the path in this life, God sees that our intention to do so existed. Therefore, he grants us the human birth again to enable us to continue from where he had left off. In this way, we avert the great danger. Also, Sri Krishna says that no laws ever comes from endeavor made on this path. This is because whatever material assets we accumulate in the present life have to be left behind at the time of death. But if we make any spiritual advancement on the path of yoga, God preserves it and gives us the fruits in the next life, enabling us to start off from where we had left. Thus, having informed Arjun about its benefits, Sri Krishna now begins instructing him about the science of working without attachment. Next slide, Madhu. The essence of this shloka compiled from other commentaries and my understanding. In this verse, Lord Krishna gives us the most optimistic encouragement to Arjuna and in turn to all of us. In the present world, even for our own existence, we are subjected to various hardships. Under such a situation, a truth seeker may totally collapse and get depressed for not being able to do any sadhanas for attainment of salvation. He may have mind, desire, and ability to do, but still, the circumstances and the environment where he is placed drive him out or compel him to go back from such path. Then what he does will be negligible. Lord Krishna, the ocean of mercy, preaches, encourages, and gives life to such truth seekers. He says, in respect to Vishnu Dharma, that is work and duty towards God, if begun, or even if there is a desire to begin, it would bring a lot of virtue. It is not like worldly activities, for example, agriculture. The farmer has to plow the field, sow the seeds, and water it regularly. If it is not done properly, there will not be any result. If it is half completed, he will incur great loss. Also, to know the actual result, the farmer has to wait for the harvest. Whereas, with respect to serving God, it is different. For example, if we decide to read the works of Srimad Acharya, though we do not begin to read, that desire to read will give a lot of virtue. If actually begun, there will be additional virtue even if left in the middle. If completed as per individual capacity, it would bring lots of punya and would ultimately grant moksha. Okay, over to Sureshji, and it's open for discussion.
Thanks, Padmajashi. So we'll pause here for a minute on this shloka and would welcome any additional thoughts, any questions at this point of time.
Suresh, if I can go first, if that's all right. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. So the key message that I understood from this verse is there are two types of knowledge. You can have material knowledge, which we are all doing at this point of life in our mundane life, of going to school, going to university, having a profession and practicing our profession, making money, wealth, property, as you mentioned. So all this is material knowledge. And then you have an entirely different field called spiritual knowledge, where you want to know about the Atma Tattva that you have mentioned. So what the one that really stuck me here is, when we die, we are not going to take any of this material wealth or material knowledge with us. That is it. You might have made 10 properties, but when you are dead, the 10 properties are not going to come with you. But what Krishna is actually giving us a hint here and also an encouragement is, that word iha and abhikrama I thought was quite significant. Iha actually means the adhyatma jnana. Abhikrama means to start. Yeah, even if you make an effort to start the adhyatma jnana, then Krishna says no nasho asti. So there is no destruction. So material wealth with this life, it goes away. We are not going to gain. But even if we make a little effort in gaining spiritual knowledge, that spiritual knowledge will come with you. It will be imprinted on your linga sharira. And when you leave this body and you go and take another body that comes with you, and in the next body you start where you are. So I thought this is a very powerful verse, giving us, not only warning us of what danger is that we are going to face when we are just focused only on material knowledge, but spiritual knowledge is much more interesting. You just carry on with where you left. So that was a great encouragement that I thought. And again, pratyavaya, you don't have any sins also by doing this. So all those verses are so encouraging. So that's what I thought was a key message from when I read this verse, and also from learning from other gurus. Thank you, Suresh.
Thanks, Madhuji. Anybody else wants to add any other contribution, any other additions, please?
Suresh, this is Harish. Similar to what Madhuji just mentioned, I think one thing that resonates with me, and I wanted to clarify if I'm understanding this right on this one, is that it seems to imply that you don't need to worry about doing a lot. Even doing a little bit is going to yield a lot of benefit. And I know it sounds very suitable, for me, but is that the right interpretation, that little is, will go a long way in this journey?
Yeah, Harish, I mean, at least the way I would understand is that no doubt little does go a long way, but in the context that one can, it's not that I'm not sure in the sense, but if I could do more and choose only to do little, the proportion of the good that's going to come is also little. I'm not utilizing, as Padmajaji was mentioning, getting a human birth, getting this sadhana sharira is rare. And this is the only form in which we can actually do anything that will take us towards the desired goal. So if this opportunity where there is a possibility to do more, and if we don't utilize it, perhaps we are going to get very limited returns. But if circumstances are such that we overcome the circumstances and are single-mindedly focused, even the decision, or even the mental, the conscious effort, may not be the physical effort yet to learn, that also adds significant value, is how I would understand. But Madhu ji, please correct.
Thank you, Suresh. Yeah, I completely endorse your view on this one. Yeah, having had this sadhana sharira, let's not waste it. We must have done some punya to gain this sadhana sharira. So if we don't make full use of it and just do a lip service to adhyatma jnana, then who knows? Nobody knows what we are going to be born next. So let's make the most of what we have got, and then take the message of Krishna's encouragement and saying that it is not going to go wasted, mate. It'll probably, the interest will incur in every birth. So you're going to make more. It's like a share and stock investment. It is going to grow and get more and more in subsequent lives.
This is supposed to grow.
Thanks.
Sushruti, here I have a small question. It says it should be completed as per the individual capacity. So how do we know as an individual what our capacity is? How much are we expected to do?
At least we can start, isn't it? We don't know if this is a 100-meter race. If this is a 100-meter race, none of us know whether we are going to complete in 9 seconds or 20 seconds. But at least let's start. Let's at least start running, and then see where we will reach. We might eventually reach the destination. So you're quite right. So the destination, for some it might take long, for some it might take short, but eventually we reach our destination. It is like, this is like a rabbit and a tortoise race. So it is not a rabbit and a tortoise race, is what I was said. Each one of us take our own slow and steady wins the race. So you have to start, we all have to start, Shushru, and then we will find when we are going to finish that 100-meter dash.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Madhu. Harish, and one more point I was going to say, in Kali Yuga, even doing a little bit is more, isn't it? That also we have to keep in mind. So even doing little is good.
Yeah, absolutely, Neetaji. Doing little is more, but doing little itself is a huge effort in Kali Yuga, because you've got so many other distractions.
Yes.
Yes, Madhu. That's why we both thought, even though we are a little old, we better start now. Whenever it is, to get to that little step, we are going ahead. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Thank you.
and whatever you have said is right, because we have to take it easy, because sometimes it really becomes hard. I mean, not hard. It's it may go if you exceed than what you have to do, then it may cause some problems as well. So Nama Sankirtan is the best thing. Whichever japa you want to do, isn't it? That's what they advise. The Acharyas advise. Nama Sankirtan is the best one for Kali Yuga. And we come to the classes, we visit listen to the classes, whatever you say, or whatever other gurus tell us, whichever class you want to go, and go ahead slowly, because you are all young. Yeah, we have to do it, but without stopping, we have to do it. We can't take a break in this, but take it slow and easy. Like we said, it may be a tortoise way, but better to do it than not do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheilaji.
Thank you all.
Suresh,
yeah,
there
sorry,
may be Suresh, there may be another question from Nottingham. Just a minute.
Please, yeah.
My question was this verse refers to reading the scriptures. So my question was, things like charity and altruism, are they equally important, and what is their significance?
Yeah, thanks, Jamna. I think, they certainly are the characteristics. Those are the acts that define the people with Sattvika Gunas, right? I mean, when Krishna talks about what are the properties, what are the Daivi Sampat, what is the Asuri Sampat when it comes to chapter 16. So some of these acts that, like a donation or any of these well-intentioned acts, which are, I think it also comes when Ishtapurti is defined, is when we do acts which are good, they certainly yield dividends. But if they need to be done with the right intention, they need to be done with the right focus. And it's not that I am doing it, that I have got this opportunity to serve, and the Antaryami in me is actually enabling me to do. So if one does these things with the right understanding, perhaps it yields significant dividends. And this context here, perhaps this is more a journey towards understanding the jnana, the knowledge about the Atma Tattva. So those acts perhaps will facilitate, they show the characteristics, but the journey for us is to make sure that we dwell deep and comprehend and experience and understand the truth. That's how at least I was understanding. Madhu, please feel free to correct.
So I'm sure others will have to will contribute here, but that's a frequently asked question, isn't it? About, do I really have to invest a lot of time in doing spiritual efforts, spiritual knowledge, and so on, when I am in this life? Whatever I earn, I want to give it in charity. I want to help the poor. I want to build education institution. I want to serve the ill and people and so on. So as you said, those are all noble thoughts per se. Yes, they are good, and they probably reflect an attribute of a person. But the scriptures are very clear. Scriptures clearly tell us that knowledge alone is liberating. Yeah, knowledge alone is liberating. Karma alone cannot liberate one from the shackles of samsara. So karma should be used as a upaya towards spiritual knowledge, and then liberation. So that's the sequence of steps that the scriptures have has informed us. So we have to follow that. Nobody is saying you do not do charity. Of course, we all have to do that. It's an injunction in our scriptures. It's an injunction in our Vedas, but many of us don't follow it. Charity is an injunction in other religions, and many people follow it very, very strictly. Somehow we have lost our grips with this, but yes, it should be done. But karma alone is not liberating. Jnana is liberating with divine grace, is the clear instruction of the Vedas.
Thanks, Madhu. And just looking at the time, we have enough to cover as we move on. So on this path of then, the next question is, what is it that's to be known? So maybe Padmajaji, back to you again as we review verse 41, please.
Thank you, Sureshji. So verse 41, Vyavasatmika buddhi ekeha kuru nandana bahushaka hayantascha buddhayo vyavasayina. Translation, O descendant of the Gurus, the intellect of those who are in this path is resolute, and their aim is one-pointed. But the intellect of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Commentary. Attachment is a function of the mind. Its manifestation is that the mind repeatedly runs towards the object of its attachment, which could be persons, sensual objects, prestige, bodily comfort, situations, and so on. So if thoughts of some person or object repeatedly come to the mind, it is a possible indication of the mind being attached to it. However, if it is the mind that gets attached, then why is Sri Krishna bringing the intellect into the topic of attachment? Is there any role of the intellect in eliminating attachment? Within our body is the subtle antakaran, which we also colloquially refer to as the heart. It consists of the mind, the intellect, and the ego. In this subtle machine, the intellect is superior to mind. It makes decisions while the mind creates desires and gets attached to the object of affection as determined by the intellect. For instance, if the intellect decides that money is the source of happiness, the mind hankers for wealth. If the intellect decides that prestige is the most important thing in life, the mind craves for reputation and fame. In other words, the mind develops desires in accordance with the knowledge of the intellect. Next slide, Mother. Throughout the day, we humans control our mind with the intellect. While sitting at home, we adopt informal postures in which the mind finds comfort. Yet, we adopt appropriate formal postures while sitting in the office. It is not that the mind enjoys the formality of the office. Given its way, it would rather embrace the informality of the home. However, the intellect decides that formal behavior is necessary in the office. So the intellect controls the mind, and people sit formally all day long, following the decorum of the workplace against the nature of the mind. Similarly, the mind does not enjoy doing office work. If it had its way, it would rather sit at home and watch television. But the intellect rules that working in office is necessary to earn a living. Therefore, the intellect again reigns in the natural tendency of the mind, and people work 8 hours a day or longer. The above examples illustrates that as human beings, our intellect possesses the ability to control the mind. Thus, we must cultivate the intellect with proper knowledge and use it to guide the mind in the proper direction. Buddhi Yoga is the art of detaching the mind from the fruits of action by developing a resolute decision of the intellect that all work is meant for the pleasure of God. Such a person of resolute intellect cultivates single-minded focus on the goal and traverses the path like an arrow released from the bow. This resolve becomes so strong in higher stages of sadhana that nothing can deter the sadhak from threading the path. He or she thinks, even if there are millions of obstacles on my path, even if the whole world condemns me, even if I had to lay down my life, I will still not give up my sadhana. But those whose intellect is many-branched find their mind running in various directions. They are unable to develop the focus of mind that is required to thread the path to God. Next line, Madhu. Essence of this shloka compiled from other commentaries. This verse is of great and unique importance in the Vedantic world. Lord Krishna says in this world, that which is established or supported by unimpeachable authorities like Vedas and Agamas are only one. There is no doubt of conflict. But those not determined or established by valid authority are many, have many branches and diverse. The real difficulty is to choose the right one. God has given us Manusha Janma. We have the capacity to think and reason out. No one has seen God. Truth will be one, and we have to find it out. It's not easy. We have to work hard, read, understand Vedas and Agamas. We should also understand the relationship between Paramatma, Jivatma, and Jada, which are five-folded. Finally, through Nishkama Karma, one should know the truth that Lord Krishna is the superior most with infinite attributes and qualities. So this is again open for discussion. Over to Suresh.
Thanks, Padmajaji. So again, please, any contributions, any thoughts, any additional thoughts? The floor is open.
Suresh, this is Harish. I was going to connect this to what Madhuji said earlier, that I think if your intellect, I mean, he was giving the importance of why understanding is important. And I guess my understanding is that if you're able to use your intellect and you understand, then through that understanding, the mind can be controlled. I mean, in a very simplistic way, that's how I'm interpreting this shloka.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I would agree, Harish. Yeah, I mean, you will be able to control. One needs to control the mind, but I think the important point that this shloka brings out is the fact that there is one universal truth, and we need to understand it right. And if for some reason we tend to conclude that there are more than one truths, then perhaps we're not understanding it right. At least that was the other message that I was getting from this verse.
Thank you, Suresh. Pragnesh has raised his hands. Pragnesh ji?
Briefly, Ratha Kalpana has been very extensively used as an example in scriptures, where 5 horses are discussed as senses, the reins as mind, and the charioteer as intellect. Thank you.
Yeah, Suresh, can I come in particular verses here? So yeah, Harish picked up an interesting discussion around buddhi. What is the meaning of that word buddhi that Krishna has used? Yeah, and as you know, in that we all know that Bhagavad Gita has got so many minimum meanings, 10 different meanings, as we are told. At least there are 10 different meanings of interpreting each word. So different acharyas have taken the word buddhi slightly differently. They've interpreted this. And Atmika has also been interpreted by different acharyas differently. But the what is the meaning of that word comes from the context in which the verse is actually placed. So when it says Eka Iha Kurunandana, Vyavasayatmika Buddhihi Eka Iha Kurunandana. So what one view there is, Buddhi actually means teaching, and Atmika means pramanas. Vyavasaya means he who churns the means of knowledge. So you have Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agamas. He who has how a farmer plows the land to get yield crops, good crops. Similarly, he who plows the land, he who works hard on these pramanas to understand what is it that the scriptures are saying, then what will happen is he will do what is called a samanvaya. So we have done this when we did Brahma Sutra, if you remember, Tattu Samanvayat. Yeah, 4th Sutra Veda Vyasa. So he will do samanvaya. Samanvaya is what is the interpretation of the Shastras, what is the meaning, what is the syntax, what is the etymology, what is the grammar, what is it that Krishna is saying, what is it that the Vedas are saying. And when you do these kind of plowing of the land, then you reach a truth, and that truth is uniform. No matter whether you see it in Bhagavatam or Gita or Vedas or Upanishads, they all talk about Eko Devaha Sarva Bhuteshu Gudaha. It is the same one Deva that they all talk about. And last week I spoke to you about this incidence of Acharya and a conversation with Jalaluddin Khilji. And he brings this and says, it is the same person. So the one who has done that Vyavasaya of the scriptures will know that there is only one truth, which is the supreme being, who is an independent being. For us, he is called Eko Vish. We call him as Swatantro Bhagavan Vishnu. It's just one name. But those who do not do that vyavasaya. So that's why he says avyavasayinam. Bahushakahi anantashcha buddhaya avyavasayinam. Those who don't do that plowing of pramanas, for them they will have different interpretations. They will have different demigods or devatas that they will worship. But those who go to the root of the problem will not then come to the conclusion that it is only me that you have to worship. So that is how I read this verse, taking into the various descriptions, but primarily the prakarana within the verse itself as described by Acharya. Thank you, Suresh.
Madhu,
Thanks,
can I
Madhu.
ask you a question, Madhu? I mean, I didn't understand. We have to work hard. That I understood. We should understand the relationship between Paramatma, Jivatma, and Jada, which you have told us. But which are five-folded? Is it Adhyatmika, Adidaivika, like that, or is it something else?
Suresh, do you want to take it up, please?
Yes, I mean, it is the interrelationship between these three, which is the fivefold differentiations, that the two jivas are separate, the jadas are separate, the jiva and jada is separate, and Paramatma is separate. So in this permutation, you will end up with a fivefold differentiation. That's the Panchabheda that we're talking about in this context.
Thank you, Suresh, because I know Madhu has mentioned it, but I had forgotten it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's one of the 9 gems that we touched upon when we did.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I think it's a good segue the way Madhu just summarized with the example of the agriculture, that if we go to the next slide, Madhu, please. If we do plow, if we dig deep, we will, one will arrive at that one universal truth, that there is one truth for the entire existence. But we do know there are many different commentaries, many different interpretations, different texts. And in this section between verses 42 to 46, Krishna is cautioning us. He's making us aware that one should not get carried away by just the superficial reading of these texts. One really needs to go deep and understand the core meaning of what is being conveyed. He's saying, Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha Vedavadarata partha nanya dastiti vadinaha. He's using the word here, Vedavadarata partha. People who don't fully comprehend it. Maybe somebody articulates the scriptures flawlessly. That does not necessarily mean that they have understood the very essence of it. So just by reading superficially and picking up the low-hanging fruits, if one has actually planted a tree to bear a fruit, one needs to wait for it to flower first, and the flower then becomes the fruit. But if you pluck the flower, you will never be able to know what the fruit was. So then he goes on further up to verse 47, where he actually compares the effort of the knower, the one who actually digs deep and understands the truth, to somebody who is just reads it superficially, like someone putting all the time and energy to dig a well, and the other person just standing next to flowing water and enjoying that and the more benefits. So having told us that we actually need to get to the bottom, do samanvaya across the shastras, across the prasthanatrayas, and then understand what is the essence that is being conveyed, Krishna then takes the discussion forward in the section between verses 47 and 53, wherein he defines what is yoga. And this is where some of the most famous verses of this chapter do come, which talk about pursuit of action or knowledge and pursuit of knowledge. He says, Karmanne vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalahe turbuhu mate sangostva karmani. The one thing that we have a right on and that we should do is perform our duties. So he's actually telling us it's extremely essential, guys. Get up, go, perform, do your duties. one shloka later, in 49, he says, Durena hevaram karma, buddhi yoga dhananjaya, buddhao sharanamanmichar, krupana palahetavaha. You know what? All this, the rewards that you get by doing, by just doing karma, they are far inferior to the pursuit of knowledge. So take refuge in divine knowledge. At this point, Arjuna seems to be saying, hey, hold on for a minute. What are you saying? You want me to go and fight this monstrous wall and kill people? And you're telling me that the outcome of this is far inferior to pursuing knowledge? Why should I do that? But you know what? I will ask that question later. I'll pick it up as chapter 3 begins. But at this point of time, help me understand, help us through me, help everyone understand as to how does one identify this individual who's let's assume he's followed what you have told, he's controlled his sense organs, and he is actually understood, and he now fully comprehends this knowledge about Sankhya. What's his disposition? How does he come about? And this, what Arjuna asks, and how Krishna responds will be discussed by Kamalaji in the next two verses that follow. So over to you, Kamalaji.
Arjuna vacha sthita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya se keshava sitadi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajyate kim. Translation. Arjuna said, O Keshava, what is the disposition of one who is situated in divine consciousness? How does an enlightened person talk? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Commentary. The designation Sthita Prajna, one with steady intellect, and Samadhista, situated in trance, apply to enlightened persons. Having heard from Sri Krishna about the state of perfect yoga or samadhi, Arjuna asks a natural question. He wishes to know the nature of the mind of a person who is in this state. Additionally, he wishes to know how this divine state of mind manifests in a person's behavior. Beginning with this verse, Arjuna asked Sri Krishna 16 sets of questions. In response, Sri Krishna reveals the deepest secrets of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, austerity, meditation, etc. My understanding of this verse, Arjuna questioned Keshava, a person in deep and concentrated meditation who had God vision, Bimbarupa Paramatma Darshan, being an Aparoksha Jnani. What are the qualities? Such great person who has seen by perception and immersed in the ocean of joy and happiness, why should he talk to others? Why should he sit down? Why should he walk? Or why should he go around begging from others? This sloka 54 should therefore be taken to elicit certain coextensive characteristics by which the Aparoksha Jnani for Sthita Prajna can be distinguished. Not that Arjuna doesn't know the definition or the coextensive characteristics of the Aparoksha Jnani. He himself is a Aparoksha Jnani. This has been told by Arjuna as a representative to help the ignorant world and the deserving devotees, and in raising such doubts for getting special knowledge to them, as well as to strongly make them unaltered in their minds. Then, for what should he who has visioned Brahman move about, talk, take food, and so on? One school of thought establishes on realization of knowledge of Brahman, the Brahmajnani becomes identical with Brahman and he becomes Nirguna Brahman. There cannot be any action, speech, and talk or any work. This point is criticized by Arjuna by saying, Vamadeva, a Brahmajnani, begs for alms. To clarify this doubt, Arjuna asked a question. An Aparoksha Jnani who had the blissful vision of Paramatman should not have any need to engage in any external activity or social mingling. This objection is met by pointing out that though he had the vision of God, still the influence of prarabdha karma hides it to some extent and guided for the most part by the influence of previous impressions, vasanas. He engages in external activities with a slight touch of personal interest. Over to Suresh ji, open for discussion.
Thanks, Kamalaji. So any quick comments on this verse? This is where Arjuna is asking a very important question. And of course, Krishna responds following in the next set of verses. So in what Arjuna has asked, Any additional comments, any other thoughts, any questions, please?
Suresh, I just wanted to take one verse there because here Arjuna is addressing Krishna as Keshava. Yeah, I just want to take the etymology of Keshava here, which is interesting because as we know, the name Keshava is a name for Krishna or Vishnu. And why is he called Keshava? Yes, beautiful hair is one meaning, but that is one meaning of Keshava. But Keshava, the etymology of that word Keshava, of course, itself is very, very important. So Keshava splits into Ka plus Isha plus Va. Ka is the name of Chaturmukha Brahma. And Isha is Shiva. Va stands for Vartayati, or he who is the controller. So he is called Keshava not because he's got beautiful hair, maybe so in Krishna Avatara, but he had the name of Keshava even before creation. He had that name of Keshava because he is the one who is the controller of Chaturmukha Brahma and Shiva, and that is why he is called Keshava. And I just wanted to pick this up because next week when we do Chandogya Upanishad, this actually comes as a root point for discussion. I just thought it's interesting. So that was my contribution for this verse. And the other one is the concept of Aparoksha Jnani again. There are different acharyas with different interpretations of this verse. Some schools don't take this as a description of who an Aparoksha Jnani is. And we have had the discussion before. An Aparoksha Jnani is a close example of that is he who has got his third eye open and he is actually having a direct vision of the Supreme is the Aparoksha Jnani. And he is in that state of infinite bliss in association with the Supreme. So the question there is, why should he bother waking up? Why should he sit? Why should he speak? So that is what is how this verse seems to open up, but there are other interpretations of it. So maybe we will have other friends come in and contribute here with regards to other ways of looking at this verse. Thank you, Suresh.
Thanks, Madhuji. Anybody else?
Suresh, this is Harish. I actually had more of a question. This description which explains why Aparoksha Jnani, still has to do some worldly things. Where is this coming from? I mean, is this commentary from an acharya? Or I just wasn't sure where this last paragraph that we're seeing here comes from.
Yeah, so Suresh, yeah, you want to take it up?
Yeah, please go ahead, Madhu.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I? Okay. Fine. So Harish, the Aparoksha Jnani, just because somebody has a God vision does not mean that he has exhausted all his karmas. Yeah. So one view of karma is the prarabdha karma is always there, and the famous example that is given about a prarabdha karma is you have a bow, you have an arrow, and then you have a box with all the arrows. Yeah. The box with all the arrows is all your accumulated karmas from all your previous lives. When somebody becomes an Aparoksha Jnana, Veda Vyasa in Brahma Sutra, there is a particular pada called Karmakshaya pada, yeah, which deals with this problem in Brahma Sutra, 4th Adhyaya, where when somebody has Aparoksha Jnana, the previous accumulated karmas gets dissolved. But the karmas that have now gone into volition, so this is equivalent to somebody who has taken a bow and he has fired that arrow. The arrow has left the bow. So that arrow is going, right? So that is what prarabdha karma is. So that prarabdha karma, irrespective of whether it's an Aparoksha Jnani or not, he has to exhaust that prarabdha karma. So I would encourage you to go to the 4th Adhyaya of Brahma Sutra and look at various examples. There are various rishis who are being cited there. For example, one of the rishis had to take 50 births simultaneously and then exhaust all his prarabdha karma, so says the Vedas. So there are all those kind of examples. So prarabdha karma, irrespective of whether you're an Aparoksha Jnani or not, you have to go through it and then finish it. Yeah, so this is how I have understood it, but you can get more information from Karmakshaya Pada of Brahma Sutra.
I got it. And that also kind of implies, I mean, I may not be using the right word, but they may not be perfect for those reasons, right? Is that there is still some karmas to work out.
Acharya has mentioned this, Acharya ji has mentioned this in the last verse of, I think in his last commentary of this chapter, because he has given this in detail as well.
Thank you, Shreya.
Thank you. So I think we'll move on. Just I'm slightly conscious of the time as well. We still have a lot to cover in today's session. Krishna does respond. He begins by description of qualities of such a person. Kamalaji, back to you.
Shri Bhagavan Prajati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogataan atmanyeva atmana tushtaha stita prajnastadochyate. Translation. The Supreme Lord said, O Partha, when one discards all selfish desires and cravings of the senses that torment the mind and becomes satisfied in the realization of the self, such a person is said to be transcendentally situated. Commentary. Sri Krishna begins answering Arjuna's questions here and continues till the end of the chapter. Each fragment is naturally drawn towards its whole. Just as a piece of stone is drawn by the force of gravitation towards the earth, the individual soul is a fragment of God, who is infinite bliss. Hence, the soul is fragment of the ocean of infinite bliss, and it experiences the natural urge for bliss. When it strives to relish the bliss of the soul from God, it is called divine love. But when, in ignorance of its spiritual nature, it thinks of itself as the body and seeks to relish the bliss of the body from the world, it is called lust. This world has been called Mriga Trishna in the scriptures, meaning like the mirage seen by the deer. The sun rays reflecting on the hot desert and sand create an illusion of water for the deer. It thinks there is water ahead of it and runs to quench its thirst. But the more it runs towards the water, the more mirage fades away. Its dull intellect cannot recognize that it is running after an illusion. The unfortunate deer keeps chasing the illusory water and dies of exhaustion on the desert sand. Similarly, the material energy Maya too creates an illusion of happiness, and we run after that illusory happiness in the hope of quenching the thirst of our senses. Next slide, Madhu. But no matter how much we try, happiness keeps fading further away from us. The Garuda Purana states, a king wishes to be the emperor of the whole world. The emperor aspires to be a celestial god. A celestial god seeks to be Indra, the king of heaven, and Indra decides to be Brahma, the secondary creator. Yet the thirst for material enjoyment does not get satiated. But when one learns to turn the mind away from material allurements and renounces the desires of the senses, such a person comes in touch with the inner bliss of the soul and becomes transcendentally situated. The Katha Upanishad goes to the extent of saying that one who has renounced desires becomes like God. When one eliminates all selfish desires from the heart, then the materially fettered Jivatma, the soul, attains freedom from birth and death and becomes God-like in virtue. Sri Krishna states in the above verse that a transcendentally situated person is one who has given up selfish desires and cravings of the senses and is satisfied in the self. My impression of this verse, Lord Krishna replies to Arjuna, Partha, when all evil desires, anger, prejudice in the mind is left off from the root totally, with single-mindedness in God, with all concentration, and by his grace gets full satisfaction, at the time he will be called as Aparoksha Jnani. For the question raised by Arjuna, what are the qualities of Aparoksha Jnana? Devotee who had God vision. Number 2, what is his actions? For the first question, the answer given by Lord Krishna, leaving almost all bad desires, placing the mind only in God, being content. Mind is like the main switch. If it is proper and pure, it will show the way to exonerate from samsara, that is moksha. If it is impure, you have to toil in the samsara. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, Manogatan. Arjuna, keep your mind always pure. That is the quality of God vision. Devotion, when this is attained, Atmaneva in Paramatma, with concentrated mind, Atmana by the grace of Paramatma, that devotee will be in entire satisfaction. Like this, we find many examples in our scriptures, say sage Vasishta and sage Atreya, who had content of mind. Therefore, for Aparoksha Jnana, foremost is purity of mind. For the question number 2, the answer given by Lord Krishna, the important word here is Manogatan. What are the bad desires in mind? They are 6: Kama, Krodha, Mada, Moha, Lobha, and Matsarya. This should be left off by the root from the mind. Then comes Prajahati. In this, if we leave Jahati, pra is the adverb, enhances the quality of the verb. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, Prajahati means totally leave. Therefore, the mind should be pure. Merely by taking bath will not make you pure. Only by knowing the Brahman will make you pure. And this sloka is based on Vedic mandate. Manayeva Manushanam Karanam Bandha Mokshayoho. Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Over to Suresh ji. Open for discussion.
Thanks, Kamalaji. Yeah, a very precise summary. So open for discussion again. Any thoughts? Any other ways of looking at it? Any questions? Please feel free.
One point, Suresh, that I wanted to share, and Kamalaji also mentioned that, is that key. I mean, of course, there's so many important verses. The key words, Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha. Yeah. So Atmani eva Atmana. So that is about bringing about the concept of divine grace or God's grace. So even for somebody to attain aparoksha jnana, God's grace is required. So although in 10, 15, 20 minutes ago, we said karma is not liberating, we said jnana alone is liberating. The reason is, why is jnana alone liberating? Because he likes folks who have knowledge. Who is that fellow who likes? Is Supreme Krishna, who likes folks who know about him. So when he likes and he is moved when we know about him, and when he is moved, that is why we call it as divine grace. And when he is moved, he says, okay, let me show you a glimpse of myself. And he opens up the third eye and the soul sees it. So this concept is captured in this verse, Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha. So he who thinks knowledge alone is liberating without grace is a complete fool. Yeah, just reading a book and memorizing a particular concept from a book and suddenly thinking that that's going to liberate him he really is a fool. Divine grace is absolutely essential, and Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha, I think, brings forth this argument also strongly. So that's what I wanted to remind everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mabushi. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions or any other thoughts? If not, then Madhu, let's move on to the next slide. So from what we saw previously, from what Kamalaji was saying and where Madhu added, the core concept that seems to be coming out is the ability to control one's mind or to make one's mind strong such that it can control the senses, the sense organs. It seems much easier said than done. Normal experience says that it's not so easy. But here is Krishna who's actually suggesting to Arjuna and is saying that, you know what, you have a human body, a sadhana sharira. Some animals can actually do it. Why not you? And he gives this beautiful example of a tortoise. Yada samharate chayam kurmonga niva sarvashah indriyartebhyah tasya prajna pratishtita. Just like a tortoise which withdraws all its limbs within its shell, one needs to withdraw all their sense organs within this shell of a mind. And he's using a tortoise as an example here, because the shell of the tortoise is one of the strongest, the hardest things that exist. I guess I was just looking up, it requires around 1,000 pounds of pressure to break the shell of the tortoise. So that's how we need to perhaps train our mind to be that hard, such that once we can withdraw the senses and they can then be controlled. Why is it so necessary? Because even if one sense organ is let loose, it then interacts with the sense objects. And interaction with the sense objects leads to desire. a desire to see, a desire to touch, a desire to feel. Non-fulfillment of the desire leads to anger. Anger leads to confusion. Confusion causes loss of memory. Loss of memory leads to loss of intellect, which means that the individual is ruined. These two verses, 62 and 63, can simply be read with no context of philosophy or spirituality as well, just our day-to-day experience, and can teach us a lot. So one of the two at least two shlokas that have appealed to me since my childhood, Dhyayate Vishayan Punsaha, Sangaste Shupajayate, Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha, Kamat Krodho Vijayate, Krodhat Bhavati Sammohaha, Sammohat Smrutivibhramaha, Smrutirbhramshat Buddhinashaha, Buddhinashat Pranashyati. So then, having described the qualities of this Aparoksha Jnani, Krishna then answers the question that Arjuna had initially asked, what's the disposition of this Sthita Prajna? And Krishna says, Yanisha Sarva Bhutanam Tasyam Jagarti Sanyami Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani Sanisha Pashyato Mune. These guys, these Aparoksha Jnanis, they are living in a different world altogether. What we, Nitya Sansaris, mere mortals, consider as gainful activity, gainful engagement, to them perhaps means nothing. And aspects that we, as ordinary human beings, fail to perceive, fail to sense, fail to see, perhaps they revel in such space. And that's how they are so different, in the sense that it is not, you cannot identify this person from just external appearances. You will have to know this person, the person's mind, to know who an Aparoksha Jnani is. There are some brilliant examples like Sage Ritvik or Jada Bharata, which are given as examples to illustrate how Sthita Prajna does come across. So with this, we've tried to cover, we've taken a little more time than we had planned to cover the remaining portions, the second half of the second chapter. We will now move on to the quiz. And before that, I'll pause here again. If there are any additional thoughts, any questions, any other comments, please feel free.
Hi, can I ask a question? This is to Madhu or Suresh, whoever. So the conventional meaning of the word buddhi is wisdom. And is there some sort of different meanings here?
Madhu, do you want to take the question?
Devalji, you broke. There was some background noise. Do you mind just repeating that question again, Devalji?
The conventional meaning of the word buddhi is wisdom. So I'm asking, is there different meanings to the word which has been used in these particular shlokas?
Yeah, sure. So buddhi, you're right. One meaning of this is intellect, which is one of the components of the mind, one of the 5 components of you have manas, buddhi, ahankara, chitta, chetana. In that buddhi is intellect, which decides which is right or wrong. Mind just gets decides and throws things into the brain. So that is one meaning of buddhi. But when you break open and you look at the etymology of the word buddhi itself, there are other meanings of that, Devalji. I can take it up offline and I'll send you some details as to what that buddhi actually opens up etymologically. Because one view there is buddhi actually means teachings. Yeah, teachings of the Vedas. So Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhihi. So when that verse comes, Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhihi, that Atmika is pramanas and Buddhihi is the teachings. The teachings that you get from the 3 pramanas, and you do Vyavasaya. So, and then you get the right knowledge is one view. So there are other interpretations. So one other interpretation of buddhi is teachings.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you all. So now we will then move on to the next section, which Pragnesh ji will be hosting, which is the quiz. And after the quiz, we will again open it up for any questions or comments and look at the last couple of verses to conclude this discussion on chapter 2. Over to you, Pragnesh ji.
Pragnesh, you need to unmute. We haven't heard you at all.
Okay, I have unmuted myself now, and now I will go to the quiz. Are you able to see and hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you for giving this opportunity. We have 15 questions, and in theory, we have got 30 minutes. After each question, there will be 30 seconds music for you to think before responding. That's number one. And I have to make two disclaimers. One is with the medical background and with interest in education, there'll be some bias towards medicine and education. So please pardon me for that. Most of the things we have covered in the discussion, but this is like a formative assessment, not summative assessment. So the outcome is not going to be punitive, but unlike as you see in the picture here that Dronacharya has taken all the Pandavas and Kauravas for the examination, the final judgment day, where the aim was to look at the eye of a sparrow, and only Arjuna gets to the exam. As a neurosurgeon, not only we look at the eyes, but we also look at the pupillary reactions. So what I'm giving you hint here is that in the some of the slides that follow, there will be cues and hints within the slides to make your learning more inclusive. So now the quiz starts. The first question is, sorry, because, yeah, okay. So the first question is, Arjuna is addressed by how many different names in this half of second chapter, and what are those? Can we have a music, please, Madhuji? Once the music starts, you will have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, just hang on a minute. I think we will first, for the first question, we will mentally do 30 seconds. Let me get the music on.
That's fine. So while you are thinking, the hint is already on the slide, and whether it is the length of the line or where number of lines, or you can think of.
You do the timing.
Okay, so any answers?
There is one answer, Pragnesh ji, on the chat box of 5 from Sheila ji, I suppose.
That person is not only looking at the eye of a sparrow, but also looking at the pupillary reaction. 100 marks. And if they can give what are those names, that's part 2. Anybody?
Kurunandana, Partha, Arjuna, Dhananjaya, Dhananjaya.
In order to move on, you are right. The 5 is absolutely correct answer, though some of the names have been repeated. Now I know we have learned a lot that everything is in etymology. We do not have enough time, but I'm going to give you all the verses here. So in these 4 verses, the Parth has been used, and in the next verse, Kurunandan is used. and in 2 verses Dhananjay is used, and in one Kaunteya, in one Mahabahu.
Yeah, Arjuna is also used in
Yeah.
one.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. So if there is no question, of course, this was an icebreaker, so I did not expect any questions out of this, but in the subsequent questions, there could be some discussions. Madhuji, do you want to say anything, or are we ready for the next one with the 30-second music this time?
Yeah, go for the next question, Pragneshji.
So the next question is, the importance of equanimity is explained in which verse? Now you can think of equanimity as either pleasure or pain or loss and gain. So that's a hint. And why is it important? Which is more important question. Music. Okay, any responses, please?
Yes, we have got 2 responses. I think Sheila ji has said verse 45, and Neeta and Sushruth have said verse 55.
Okay, so there is slight difference here. By the way, when I tried to import this image from the Google, this was a doctor's dilemma in Corona-19 pandemic. So actually the answer is 38, and this is the reason is not to incur the scene, and the answer is in this verse. It says Sukha Dukkha Same Krutva Labha Labhav Jaya Jayo. So these are the 3 different examples of equanimity explained here: Sukh and Dukh, Labh and Alabh, and Jay and Ajay. Tato Yuddhaya Yujjasva Nainam Papa Mavaprashi. That means if you remain equanimitous in this, you do not incur any sin. Any further discussion?
That was wonderful, Pragneshji. I think you can go on to the next question.
Thank you. So the next question is, how can one be free from bonds of action and reaction? The pictures hint. 30 seconds, please. Thank you very much. Surajji, thank you for moderating the chat box. Any responses?
No, none
Now,
for this.
because this is like an open book exam, so there could be many ways to free from bonds of action and reaction. But if we follow the strict second half of the second chapter, then I am looking for 2 words which are missing here. Anybody wants to try with this hint? I'm looking for 1 word before the bold letters and 1 word after the bold letters. And the 2 pictures are telling both the options.
Nishkama.
Yes, correct. Well done.
Krishna.
Nishkama karma.
And Tyaga, Karma Phala Tyaga and Ishvara Arpana Bhava. So in the first picture, I think Arjuna is submitting all actions to Lord Krishna. And in second, I feel, this is my interpretation, that he is giving all the outcomes of the actions also to Lord Krishna, which is not very easy in day-to-day practice. And this is the verse. I'm not going to read, for you can continue, but this is what Madhuji, any commentary, please?
Yeah, so this one, so Pragnesh, yeah, thank you very much for bringing this. Eshate abhihita sankhya buddher yogo tvam mam shruno buddhaya yukto yaya partha karma bandhanam prahasyasi. So that right knowledge of doing one's action will liberate one from action and its reaction. What is that right knowledge? I think Suresh ji mentioned that in one of the verses, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So your jurisdiction is only in doing your action. The jurisdiction of providing fruits of your action is with me. So our jurisdictions are slightly different. You just do your karma. I shall decide what kind of phalas I have to give you. If you decide you will do the action and you also want to expect karma phala for that, you will incur karma imprints. Yeah. So that is what Krishna has said in that particular verse. And again, that is what this introduction of this verse is, where he clearly says, Buddhaya yukto yata apartha karma bandhanam prahasyasi. When you know whose jurisdiction is what, then you can conduct your affairs of life with that knowledge in mind. Thank you, Pragnesh. We can go to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next, which is the fourth question, why does Lord Krishna ask Arjuna to reject rituals described in Vedas? Now here it is a very controversial, and I myself struggled to interpret this when I was studying. The picture is, somebody may know this, but in the interest of time, if I say, it is a Lord Buddha talking about the health physician talking about what they should do. And in my profession, when we discussed in a group, the best analogy came as a neurosurgeon. I have to change from my civilian clothes to theater greens and then scrub before gowning and glowing, which is a ritual, which is what I have to follow every day while operating on patients. But what I need to focus on is not only that. I should not remain only restricted to that. I need to get on and concentrate more onto the real aspect of operating, handling the brain and the spinal cord, etc. So that is what in real life also matters. 30 seconds, please, while people think for that. Any responses? Sorry,
43 is a response that I'm saying. 55, no, 55 was the previous response. 43.
Okay. So what Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna is to not get attached to the lower modes of material nature, which is what I described in the rituals. That's what they say, that in the rituals you shouldn't get attached to the three modes of material nature, mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance, known as sattva, rajas, and tamas respectively. And the answer is in 45. Trai gunesh vishya veda nistrai guno bhavarjuna nirdvando nityavastasto niryoge kshama atmavan. Any etymological discussion, Madhuji?
Yes, sure, Pragnesh ji. So they think that your analogy of dressing up before you go into the theater is the perfect one, because the fellows who were doing just dressing up and but not bothering to do the surgeries were Purva Mimamsakas. So there is one school of Vedanta, as you know, one of the school of Indian philosophies among the six darshanas is Purva Mimamsakas. What do the Purva Mimamsakas do? They do only yajnas and rituals. I throw something into the fire and you will go to a heavenly place. You will go to Swarga, and then again you will come back again. So you keep doing these rituals. You go up and down in the ladder, and you never attain liberation. So that is one thing that Krishna is telling you here, that you get away from that mode of doing an yajna. The yajna has got deeper meanings. And we have done this before about how when you do a Vedic yajna, there are four fellows. There are Hotra, Udvaryo, Udgatra, and Brahman. Then each of these four priests have got 3 assistants. So there are 16 priests around a kunda doing a yajna. And then there is a Yajamana and his wife. And there are 16 plus 2, that is 18. There you go. There is another 18 that is coming up in even doing Vedic rituals and how you do it. So the 16, as you know, is Sodasha Kala Purushaha, 17 is Sri Tattva, 18 is Vishnu. So even in that, the architecture and the number of people doing yajna itself, there is deep philosophy. So you need to look at all this when you do rituals, not just looking at the superficial sense and then go to Swarga and come back, go to some Devaloka and come back again, or sometimes go to Naraka and again come back. So that is what Krishna is asking us to look at. When Vedas prescribe a particular form of ritual, it doesn't mean that you reject it. What it means is you understand the deeper philosophy of what is the anatomy of that ritual, what is the physiology of the ritual, why is this you do. So when you do that, you get deep philosophies from that. So don't reject the Vedas because they're describing rituals, but actually understand the basis behind those rituals. Yeah, this is what Buddha tried to explain, but of course his disciples misinterpreted this and they all became anti-Vedists.
Thank you very much. Sureshji, can I move forward?
Please, Pragnesh.
Thank you. So the next question is, which of the following examples are used to explain the relation between ultimate truth and Vedic scriptures? Sureshji did refer to this and he even mentioned the sloka. So out of 4, well, ocean, river, or lake, how many of these are used to explain? 30 seconds, please. Yes. Thank you. Sureshji, any responses?
No responses.
This was particularly used to distract because
70, isn't it?
Yes, sorry?
70.
Yeah.
70. Verse 70. Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapah pravishanti yad tadvat kama yam pravishanti sarve sa shanti mapnoti na kama kami.
Maybe.
In that it's samudra.
Yeah, but we are looking for 2 examples, something link between ultimate truth. But yes, that may be an interpretation. This is the beauty of Bhagavad Gita, that the more deeper you go, like when I say most of the people like me are surface swimmers, but then those who go dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
46.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah, the
So here we will again touch base little bit of etymology. So Udapane is well and Sampludake is lake. And I had to bring this analogy. So Sureshji said that he has lived in Ahmedabad, and that is an example of a very well-known well. And I am in Scotland, and this is Loch Ness. So anybody knows what this well is? It is very famous. This one. I know it is slightly divulging, but it is Uddalaka Staff Well, very famous archaeological. Thank you.
Is it in Gujarat? Gujarat? Yeah, it's in Gujarat. We have been there last time, isn't it? Yeah.
Any question? If not, we can move in the interest of time.
Let's move to the next question, Pragnesh.
Yes. So next question is, which of the following is most famous sloka in this section? So there are 4 options.
Okay.
I know this was not easy because there were many options to frame this question.
We have 3 responses, Pragnesh ji, and all of them are saying Shloka 47.
Well done. Thank you very much. 100 marks to all the participants. So Karmanivadhikarasthe, even before I learned Sanskrit or Bhagavad Gita, this word inscribed in my mind in school walls, it was written Karmanivadhikarasthe. So we have discussed about this a lot. I think in the interest of time, if I move forward, is that okay?
Please.
In which verse the definition of yoga is given? Now we discussed about various types of yoga. So 30 seconds, please. Any responses?
48. We have 1 response from Neeta and Sushruth.
Thank you. Let's see. Absolutely correct. 100 marks. So I have slight soft corner for yoga. I will spend 1 minute. So again, here, if you go back to, this is the last line says, Samatvam yoga uchyate. So that means that is yoga. But in a conventional, especially in the West, when say I do yoga, I don't use yoga, I use yoga. But in yoga, this is what the Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga says. But here again, if we stuck our rituals on the first 4 on the left, then we will not complete the journey to reach the pure contemplation. And we do discuss contemplation a lot. But the first thing, we start with the withdrawal of senses. Thank you very much. I will move on. 8th question, we are halfway through. What binds one to the cycle of life and death? 30 seconds, please. Any responses, Surajji?
Again, Neeta and Sushruth have said verse 51. Sheilaji has said desires.
Thank you. Absolutely right. 51, and actually more than the desires, the fruits of action. If we get attached to the fruits of action, that leads to the cycle of punarapi janamam, punarapi maranam, punarapi jathari jayesh janani jayanam. That I am reminded of. So here it also says janma bandha vinur mukta padam gacchanta tatmanyam. If there is no further discussion, if I move on in the interest of time, we will have some time. I think, Madhuji, if we leave some discussions for later on, is that acceptable?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's go through the quiz, and Suresh has got a winding up session at the end. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is, which of the following sets an example of keeping senses always in the service of Lord Krishna? So there are 4 lower species are mentioned here. Thank you. Any responses?
We have 4 responses. Neeta ji, Sushruth, Veena ji, and Madhu ji have said B, and Veena has added Shloka 58.
Thank you. I think I should have put which sloka rather than, because the previous discussion, tortoise were very easy give. So here we have the answers are absolutely correct. So like tortoise, we must learn, and especially people from Vanaprastha to Sannyasashram, the last 2 quarters of a human lifestyle, we should start withdrawing, but even earlier if we are spiritually elevated. Next one, please. The immediate cause of anger is, the 4 options are given. I was thinking to add all the 6 Shadripus, but only managed to put 4. One example, 30 seconds, please. Responses, please.
So we have 4 responses. Veena ji, Sheila ji, and Madhu have said C, Kama, and Neeta and Shashwat have differed. They say it's A, and they're quoting verse 62.
Okay, that's interesting. And anybody extra brownie point? I know one picture I already given what it is, Bhagwan Parshuram. What the other picture is? Brownie point, not in the syllabus, outside the syllabus.
Krodha.
But who is that? What is it depend?
Parashurama, Krodha. I mean, sorry, what's the question?
Other picture, other picture.
The other picture.
I think Vishwamitra.
Who is the sage in the other picture?
Anyway, not in the syllabus. Durvasha is giving shrap to Shakuntala.
Oh, Shakuntala. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kamat Krodh Vijayati. That's the bottom line. We move on to the next one. Which of the following leads to clouding of judgment? Here you can see Arjuna lost, confused. Devalji would be knowing more about clouding of judgment because of her professional advantage. 30 seconds.
All of them will lead, isn't it? But the verse is saying Kamat Krodho, Krodhat Abhijayate, Krodhat
Bhavati Sammoha.
So it is a 8-step ladder, isn't it?
Yes, you are ahead of the
Question is, what's the immediate step preceding it?
Yes.
Immediate step preceding the clouding.
Just
What-
before Smriti Vibram.
Smriti, that would be what? Smriti's memory, no, it's not there in that.
The hint was, what was the
Vishaya is greed, maybe.
What was the immediate preceding question? That's the hint.
I'll play the music now for thinking for 10 seconds.
Thank you. The answer is in the
We have one answer from Pareshji, and they say it's D, passion.
in fact, the answer is Krodh, because that was also a hint I shared that it was in the previous verse we talked about anger. And I know some people were talking about the whole vicious cycle, which we are going to do the next. In fact, I felt that the 63 sloka is so powerful that I have actually made 3 questions out of this. Again, bringing medicine into questions. Sometimes anesthesia is also known as Sammohan Vidya. So Sammoh is the clouding of judgment, and Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha. That's where the answer is. So immediate cause leading to clouding of judgment is anger, and this will be confirmed in the next verse. Question, I mean. I already gave some answers. Anyway, in which verse downward fall from divinity to impiety is described? That means contemplation of sense objects to destruction of intellect. Any response?
We have one answer from Neeta and Shishrut, verse 63.
Thank you. So as I said, hint was already given. I won't dwell. And I think Madhuji, we can do without music for the next couple of ones, because they are also going to be repeated. So what is the sequence of downfall to material pool? Now here I have put all the things that we discussed earlier, the triggered cycle, but I have put them in alphabetical order. Your aim is, now this is, instead of the single based answer, this is called extended matching questions, EMQ. So I want you to have next 30 seconds and arrange them in order. Thank you. So maybe 5 to 9 or whatever, say. Let us know when you are ready. Okay, any responses?
No, none yet.
Maybe this may need little more time. Are we allowed more time? Madhuji, I'm mindful of time and discipline. I know.
Yeah, 10 to 15 more seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I remind you all of the 63 sloka, and this is the order. So contemplation leads to attachment, which leads to lust, that leads to anger, that leads to delusion, that leads to bewilderment of memory, and lastly, loss of intelligence, which is explained in this cycle as we discussed earlier. So if we get attached to objects, this is what eventually we fall. And our aim is to do the reverse journey by not being attached to the objects that we discussed previously. Now, 2 more questions remaining. The next is, Lord Krishna has shown an easy way to attain grace of God in this verse. Which is that verse, and by what mechanism we can remain free and easy path? 30 seconds, please.
Pragnesh, shall I play the music?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Any responses, Surajji?
Verse 64 from Veenaji.
Okay. Well, I get the answer.
I thought 64, 65. I don't know. But my message went to Veenaji. I don't know.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Answer is correct. And here I have given examples of the magnet. So either we get attached or we get repulsed. So by freeing one's mind from attachment and aversion. So rag dvesho, and also we know that rag dvesho bhayath krodha. So that leads to again the fall down. So in order to attain higher levels, we can remain detached from this. And the last question is, in which verse Lord Krishna is using the analogy of diurnal variation, diurnal being a medical word. I have tried to simplify it by this picture. What is he trying to explain? 30 seconds, please. Thank you very much. Suresh,
we have one answer from Neeta and Shishrat, verse 69.
Thank you very much. 100 marks. And this was also discussed earlier. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagrati sanyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato mune. I always practice this in my medical school because I had to work very hard at late night when all my friends were in bed. Thank you very much.
Same here also, Pragnesh. I was also studying a lot when all my friends were in the hostel having a good time.
And here definition of sage is explained by saying Pashyato Mune. Mune, spiritually elevated. They are given two, Sanyami and Mune. Those who are spiritually elevated are these. I stop sharing now and we'll leave the floor for open discussion and led by Sureshji's concluding remarks and Madhuji's expert comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pragneshji. I hope all of you found the quiz interesting. So now we'll just go back and we'll look at the final few slides. We still need to go further down, Madhu, right to the last but one slide. Yeah. Thanks. So just looking at the message from the Gita and from where Pragneshji left us, the definition of a Muni. So if we just look back, control of Indriyas seems to be the core, one of the core messages that Krishna is giving us. And it's extremely important that one, as we saw in the tortoise example, one withdraws all the sense organs, makes the mind solid, and make sure that one regulates the Indriyas. If not, if even a single of them is let loose, the sense organ attaches to the sense object and it actually persuades the mind and drives the intellect in a different direction. And that's how Krishna explains the hardcore essence of our ability to control, our necessity to control the sense organs, when he says Indriyanam hi charatam yan manonu vidhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayur nava vimambasi. Think of a yacht in an open ocean and with a strong wind. It's important that we control the yacht such that the power in the wind actually help us gain momentum, so we head forward to our charted destination. And should we not do it, we will end up where the wind takes us rather than where we want to go. So that was another brilliant, beautiful example for us to remember the relevance and the importance of being able to control our senses. Having said all of this, and this is where Krishna begins to conclude the chapter, he says, Vihaya kaman yasarvan pumansh charati nispruhaha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashanti madhigacchati. Having understood this, having given up all material desires, knowing the difference between the good and bad, having conquered the I, me, and myself, and not having undue attachment, then that is when perhaps to such an individual, the door, the path to make progress towards Shanti, the ultimate Sukha, Nirdukha Sukha, is open and one can make progress. And then he further adds, Esha Brahmi Sthitif Partha, this state of enlightenment, when one reaches this state of consciousness, Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati, there's no delusion. Let's remember that Arjuna was deluded despite being an Aproksha Jnani, and through Arjuna, Krishna is giving us the message that once someone gets to this level of consciousness and enlightenment, there is no further delusion. And then more importantly, he adds, Stitva asyam antakalepi brahma nirvana muchyati. So and having lived this, if one is still in this state of consciousness at the time of departure from this body, then such a jiva gains mukti. So that is that was in summary the second half of chapter 2. We've exceeded by 15-20 minutes. Apologies for that, but there was some very interesting discussion going on, and it didn't seem right to just cut short the discussion. So having said all of this, if we move to the next slide, Madhuji, like to conclude today's session that we pray with a prayer that I have picked up from the famous Vayu Stuti, which is a stuti written in praise of the three avatars of Mukhya Prana in terms of Hanuma, Bhima, Madhva, and where we pray that he grants us this ever increasing, everlasting bhakti, such that we make our journey towards the knowing, the understanding Sankhya, and therefore towards the fulfillment of the ultimate desire for every single jiva around. One more click, Madhu. Matar me matarishwan pitalatula guru bhratrarishtapta bandho swamin sarvantaratman ajara jaraita janma mrityamayanam govinde dehi bhaktim bhavati cha bhagavan nurjitam nirnimittam nirvyajyam nishchalam sadguna gana bruhatim shashwatim ashudeva. Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Thank you all. Over to you, Madhuji.
Suresh, thank you very much for that excellent coordination, and of course, I think it was a thoroughly enjoyable event. So many new points that we all grasped. The quiz was very enjoyable, Pragnesh, and Kamala and Padmaja from India. They were very, very passionate with their presentation. Lots of hard work has gone, and I know the last 5-6 days with preparations and practice runs, lots of effort. So I think that's wonderful, because that's the only way in which we could all learn the key messages of the Gita. So thank you so much for contributing. And at the same time, thanks to all of us who have taken the time to actually enjoy chapter 2. So we have done chapter 2, part A and part B. Wonderful. It was really enjoyable. Look forward to chapter 3, which is essentially how do you put all these elevated, almost impossible knowledge to actually to practice. How are we going to do that? Karma yoga is what the chapter 3 is. So we will be looking forward to the next team to come on in a fortnight's time to take us through chapter 3. So until then, stay tuned in for next week. So we are going to carry on with a contemplation of Chandogya Upanishad next Sunday, picking up on certain points that we discussed this afternoon. So see you next Sunday. Until then, stay safe, enjoy the weather. Thank you very much. Krishna Pranamastu. And can we close today's session by asking Harish to recite Om for all of us, please. Harish, are you still there? Okay,
Harish left side.
Okay, Harish may have tuned out. So yeah, Suresh, do you want to do the Omkara for all of us, please? We'll all join Suresh.
Sure. Yeah. Oh.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.